Hello, back again. Let's see if I can finish up the topic of trade on this lecture. And this is actually, lecture 6. And it's the third one on trade. And so we looked at the frontiers we created. These are the two tables. We plotted them on the graphs here. And then I said they're going to be self-sufficient by producing 5,000 tables in Lilliput and 1,000 computers in Lilliput. And that's right there. And over here we had half the workforce is making tables, remember, and that's 15 tables per worker, and that would give us 7,500 tables. Looking at the wrong number. And then 15,000 computers, which is right up there. And we put them right in the middle of their frontiers. And together we looked at the total production of both items. The two numbers added up for computers give us, for tables, give us 12,500 tables. And the two numbers give us 16,000 computers. Now down here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them specialize. And we already said that Fredonia has the comparative advantage of computers, so I'm going to move them more into computers. They were making 15,000 here. Let me move them just to this combination up here. If I go back to the table. So right now we're in between here somewhere, between these two options right here. And so I'm going to move them down to this option. Have them produce a bit more computers and less table. So let's have Fredonia making 18,000 computers and 1,000 tables. It's not some at this point right here. So I move them from there down to, and that's fine, that's legal. It can be anywhere along your production possibilities frontier. And then with Fredonia, I'm just going to make it a little easier. Let's just get rid of all the computers. Not very good at making computers. Let's just go all the way down to 0 computers and put everyone into tables. Why? Because it's one less number to worry about. So we'll just have 0 computers. And just completely specialize. Probably doesn't happen in reality, but this is just an example. And so we move them on the frontier all the way up to here. Like that. But the magic is right here. I didn't change anything. I didn't change the frontiers. I didn't change their production numbers. Each worker can still make the same amount as before. We still got 1,000 workers. I just changed what they did. And so before we did all this, in both nations, we had 12,500 tables. If you add up these two numbers, we now have 16,000 tables. So they used to have, between both of them, 12,500 tables. I've increased it to 16,000. And you might say, well, we must have less computers, but we don't. We had 16,000 before, and now we have 18,000. This is the second time in this class I'm going to say you get something for nothing. Well, I shouldn't say that. You get something without a cost. The first time was when we talked about being inside the frontier and moving toward the frontier. You can produce more without a cost because you're either you had unemployed resources or you're being inefficient. And now we can get something with no cost by simply moving workforces in different economic societies into their comparative advantage. But I haven't succeeded in making both parties better off because, again, I now have Lilliput with no computers, and they have lots of tables but no computers, so you can argue they may not be better off. And then I also have Fredonia, even though they have more computers, they have less tables. They used to have 7,500, now they have 6,000, so I cannot say they're better off either. So what I got to do now is got to have some kind of trade deal. Now, there are lots of trade deals that would work, and there's lots of trade deals that won't work. What you got to do is you got to find a trade deal that benefits both the buyer and seller. Now, we've identified the seller of computers, that's Fredonia, and we've identified the buyer of computers, the seller of tables, which is Lilliput. And so I propose one trade agreement where Freedonia, which specializes in computers, is going to ship 2,000 computers to Lilliput for 4,000 tables. And so 2,000 computers would be shipped over to Lilliput in exchange for 4,000 tables that would go to Freedonia. And now what that comes down to is one computer for every 2 tables, because it's 2 to 4, and that is ratio of 1 to 2. Or if you look at each table brings in 1/2 computer. And those are consistent with the numbers up here. Now the question is, do both parties benefit? Are they better off? And if the answer is yes, this deal will work. If they're not better off, then the answer is no, and you better find a different deal. So the question is, do they like this deal? And the answer is, it depends on what they can do themselves, because you don't have to trade. So Freedonia is selling computers and buying tables. If Freedonia bought tables from itself, remember, they can make tables. The problem is each table costs 2 computers. They can send workers from computer production to table production. Each table would cost Freedonia, remember, 2 whole computers. So what's the cost here if they want to purchase a table? It's 1/2. So paying only 1/2 computer for each table from Lilliput is a great deal. In total, Freedonia, to produce 4,000 tables, because that's what they're going to get, that's the trade deal, that's what they're going to get from Lilliput, 4,000 tables will cost them 2 times that amount and 8,000 computers. What's the number of computers they have to send to Lilliput? 2,000. That's a lot less. It's a great deal. They save themselves 6,000 computers. Freedonia says yes. You might say, well, of course, economic trade is like economic warfare. We have a lot of current politicians are saying that trade is bad, we're being taken advantage of, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's see if Lilliput's being taken advantage of. Lilliput is selling tables and buying computers. Remember, they specialize in tables. And so they could produce computers themselves. The problem is each computer is going to cost them 5 tables. And what's the cost of the trade deal? 2 tables. That's a lot less than they would have to give up themselves if they were going to make computers. So if they were going to produce the 2,000 computers, remember that's what Freedonia is going to ship to them, that would cost them 10,000 tables. Well, that's all they got. They have nothing left. So it'll take their total production to get those same 2,000 computers. So how many do they have to send to Freedonia? Only 4,000. So Freedonia saved themselves 6,000 computers, remember? Well, Lilliput saves themselves 6,000 tables. This is win-win, people. Both parties benefit. So after the trade agreement, Lilliput has 6,000 tables. Remember, they produce 10, 4 went to Freedonia, and so they have 6,000 left over. And then Freedonia ships them 2,000 computers. Remember, they had 0. Freedonia produced 6,000 tables themselves, remember, but they got 4,000 from Lilliput. They produced 18,000 computers. They had to get 2,000 to Lilliput, so they have 16,000 left over. That's also a great deal. And so these are the numbers. So what we have here is before specialization in trade, that was being self-sufficient. Remember, this is where they're right smack in the middle. So I put them right here. So let's call these points here A. And so that's A. And same thing for Freedonia. They had 7,500, 15,000 tables. That's point A. Then I had Lilliput specialized completely in tables, so we'll make these combinations point B. And point B here was not all the way down to the extreme. We moved it down to 6,000 and 18,000. And that's B. And now let's see where they're consuming. So now after the trade deal, remember they sent 4,000 tables over to Freedonia in exchange for 2,000 computers. So now they're at 6,000 tables and 2,000 computers. Well, that's way out here. I'm going to make these point C. And then 10,000 tables is right about there, and they have 18,000 computers. That's about out there. And you may say, Professor McMurrin, you told us that you can't produce beyond your production possibilities frontier, which is exactly true. But I never said you cannot consume beyond your frontier. And it looks like you can. The numbers don't lie. I haven't cheated. The production numbers are still the same. It's still 2 computers or 10 tables in Lilliput. It's still 15 tables or 30 computers in Fredonia. Sorry, I had to take care of my cat again. So where was I? Oh yeah, point C. So they're out there consuming. So the only way for Lilliput to be out there at sea having 2,000 computers and 6,000 tables is to trade. They could produce 2,000 computers themselves, but that would be it. There'd be no tables. So they're only out there because of Fredonia. And likewise, there's no way in the world Fredonia can be out there consuming this combination here without Lilliput. Both countries benefit from each other. It's win-win. And that's the benefits of trade. And this is the economist's best argument for trade, that both parties can actually live better, consume beyond their own production possibilities frontiers. Now the question is, why would anyone be against trade? And that's because there are people who are hurt by trade. It's definitely true. And my example is right here. Who's hurt by trade in these countries? Well, if you look at Lilliput, it's the computer manufacturers. We specialize completely in the tables, and so you would find that computer manufacturers in the workforce would go to their government and complain and say they're being taken advantage of, blah, 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 and therefore they want to have some kind of a trade protection imposed. Likewise, over here in Fredonia, you would have the table manufacturers complaining about losing jobs to Lilliput, which is not true. Everyone's still fully employed in Fredonia. They just had to move more into computers. And so the ones who are hurt, and the problem here is there are losses, and the losses are concentrated in certain areas. And the gains are greater than the losses, but they're distributed widely. So pretty much everyone else in the economy benefits from the trade. It's the particular industries that are hurt. And therefore, they would ask their governments to do maybe one of two things: impose some kind of a trade protection, which are come in two forms, either tariffs, which is a tax on an imported good. And by the way, the tax is not paid by the other nation, it's paid by the domestic importer. And so right now we have tariffs on a lot of Chinese goods. China is not paying those tariffs, it's the American importers. And so if the American importers are importing Japanese equipment, Japanese clothes, Japanese cars, it is the American importer who's paying that tariff. And then a quota is a numeric limitation on the imported good. And so once you reach a certain number, no more is allowed into the country. What both these things do, is we'll find out later on when we talk about supply and demand, is it causes the prices of these goods to go up. And even though in terms of a tariff, the importer pays the tax, most of that probably does get passed on to the consumer, the final buyer of it. And with a quota, there's no payment when it comes into the American port, but once, because the supply is limited, the price also goes up. So ultimately, these trade protection measures are really a tax on consumers. And we'll talk more about taxes and quotas later on, and we'll stop there. And by the way, that is the end of chapter 2.